Forget what you know about medieval knights. Forget the chivalry, the tournaments, the honor. History is not written in poetry, it is written in blood and fire. In the 14th century, one man wrote England's story across the fields of France in the blood of its nobles and the ashes of its villages. He was a prince who would never be king, but he was the undisputed master of the battlefield. The English called him Edward of Woodstock, Prince of Wales. The French knew him only as a demon, a terrifying omen on the battlefield they called Le Prince Noir, the Black Prince. How did a 16-year-old boy, his lines about to break, his commanders begging his father for aid, become the most feared warrior in all of Europe? And how, 10 years later, did he face down the entire might of France with a smaller, exhausted army and walk away with their king in chains? By the end of this journey into the savage heart of the 100 Years' War, you will understand how this English prince perfected a brutal new form of warfare, humiliated the most powerful kingdom in Christendom, and forged a legend of victory against impossible odds that defines the spirit of a nation to this day. The year is 1337. The two great superpowers of Western Europe, England and France, are locked in a dynastic struggle, a 100-year grudge match for the ultimate prize, the French crown. King Edward III of England believes it is his by right of blood. The French see him as a foreign usurper. On paper, this is no contest. France is richer, more populous, and possesses the largest and most vaunted army in the Christian world. Its nobility represents the flower of chivalry, knights clad in shining plate armor, masters of the cavalry charge that had dominated battlefields for centuries. England is an island nation, a scrapper, an underdog. Its initial campaigns in France are failing. It is outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and on the verge of being driven back into the sea. But England has a secret weapon. A new generation, born into conflict, hardened by war, and led by the king's own son and heir, Edward, the Prince of Wales. He was a prodigy, trained from birth not just to rule, but to conquer. His first test would come at a place called Crécy in the year 1346. Edward III had landed a large English army in Normandy, marching and burning his way across the French countryside. The French king, Philip VI, gathered a colossal army to crush the invaders once and for all. The English were finally cornered near the village of Crécy. They were outnumbered, by some estimates, more than 2 to 1. A sensible commander would have sued for terms, but the English were not sensible. They were dangerous. King Edward positioned his army on a gentle slope, his flanks protected by woodland. He ordered his knights and men-at-arms to dismount, to fight on foot alongside his common soldiers, and in front of them all, he planted a forest of sharpened stakes, because he wasn't relying on his knights. He was relying on the true English superweapon, the yew longbow. In the hands of a trained English archer, the longbow was a machine of war, capable of firing up to 15 arrows a minute. It was a weapon that could penetrate mail and thin plate armor at close range. It was a weapon of the common man, and it was about to unmake the noble order of France. At the very front of the English line, commanding the vanguard, was the 16-year-old Black Prince. This was his first taste of a major battle. As the French advanced, their Genoese crossbowmen allies moved forward to soften the English lines. But a sudden downpour had slackened their bowstrings, rendering them ineffective. The English archers, who could quickly unstring their bows and protect the strings under their caps, were unaffected. When the rain cleared, they stepped forward, drew, and unleashed a storm of steel. The sky went dark with English arrows. The Genoese broke and fled, crashing into the front lines of the charging French knights who, in their arrogance and fury, cut them down. The French cavalry charge, the most feared tactic in medieval warfare, became a chaotic, tangled massacre. Wave after wave of French nobility charged up the muddy slope, only to be torn apart by the relentless blizzard of arrows. Horses screamed and fell, impaling themselves on the English stakes. Knights, weighed down by their armour, were pulled from their mounts and dispatched by English infantry with daggers and mallets. In the heart of the fighting, the Black Prince's division was pushed to the absolute limit. At one point, the prince himself was knocked to his knees, his standard-bearer standing over him to defend his life. A messenger was sent, pleading with his father, King Edward, who watched from a nearby windmill, to send reinforcements. The king's reply would become the stuff of legend. He asked if his son was dead or wounded. The messenger replied that he was not. Then let the boy win his spurs, the king declared. He would send no aid. The prince must earn his victory, or die trying. And earn it he did. Inspired by their young commander's courage, the English and Welsh soldiers held their ground. By nightfall, the French army was not just defeated, it was annihilated. A huge portion of the French nobility lay dead on the field. The 16-year-old prince had not just survived his first command, he had become a legend. But Crécy was only the beginning. The Black Prince would perfect a new, terrifying strategy known as the Chevauchée. This was not warfare aimed at conquering castles or meeting in pitched battles. This was economic terrorism. For years, the prince would lead his armies on great mounted raids deep into the heart of France. They moved fast, living off the land, burning villages, destroying crops, and plundering towns. The goal was to break the French economy, to terrorize the population, and to prove that the French king was powerless to protect his own people. It was brutal, it was total war, and it was devastatingly effective. 10 years after his triumph at Crécy in 1356, the Black Prince was at it again, leading another great chevauchée through central France. His army, a mixed force of about 6,000 English, Welsh, and Gascon soldiers, was laden with plunder, but exhausted. The new French king, John II, saw his chance. He assembled a massive army, perhaps as large as 15,000 men, and cornered the prince near the city of Poitiers. This time, there would be no escape. The English were trapped, outnumbered, and facing annihilation. The French, confident of their revenge, prepared to attack. They had learned from the disaster at Crécy. This time, their knights would dismount and advance on foot, a dense wall of steel to negate the power of the English longbows. On paper, their plan was sound. But they were not facing a textbook commander, they were facing the Black Prince. Edward chose his ground with tactical genius. He positioned his small army behind a natural defensive line of thick hedges and marshy ground, creating a bottleneck that would funnel the French assault. The English longbowmen were placed on the flanks, ready to pour a devastating crossfire into any enemy that tried to advance through the gaps. The battle began. The first wave of French knights, led by their marshals, charged forward. They were immediately met by a torrent of arrows from the flanks. Their attack faltered, choked in the narrow lane, and was brutally repulsed by the English men-at-arms. A second French division attacked, this one on foot. The fighting was ferocious, a desperate close-quarters struggle in the mud and vines. But again, the English line held firm against the superior numbers. The French were taking horrendous casualties. The main French assault, led by King John himself, was yet to come. It was the largest and most powerful of all. As this final massive wave of French knights surged forward, the English began to run low on arrows. The moment of crisis was at hand. The French could smell victory. But the Black Prince had one final brilliant move to play. He had kept a small, mobile reserve of mounted knights hidden from view. As King John's division became fully engaged in the brutal infantry slog, Edward gave the signal. This hidden cavalry force swept around the French flank, crashing into their rear. At the same time, the prince ordered his entire line to advance. "Advance, banner, in the name of God and St. George," he cried. The English, who had been on the defensive all day, suddenly surged forward with a roar. The shock of the flank attack, combined with the sudden, aggressive English advance, shattered the French morale. The French army didn't just break, it dissolved. Panic set in, and the retreat became a rout. And in the midst of the chaos, the unthinkable happened. King John II of France, fighting valiantly on foot, found himself surrounded. Refusing to flee, he was captured on the battlefield, along with his youngest son and thousands of other French nobles. The Black Prince, with an army less than half the size of his enemies, had not just won a battle, he had captured a king. He had decapitated the French nation. The victory at Poitiers was a strategic masterpiece, a triumph of leadership, discipline, and tactical brilliance against overwhelming odds. The captured king was taken to London, not as a common prisoner in a dungeon, but treated with chivalrous courtesy by the prince, a calculated act of political theatre that only deepened the humiliation for France. The capture of their king plunged France into anarchy and civil war. The Black Prince had brought the mightiest kingdom in Europe to its knees. The Treaty of Bretigny in 1360 granted England vast new territories and a staggering ransom for the French king. It marked the absolute height of English power in the 100 Years' War. The Black Prince had become the living embodiment of English military might. He was the archetype of the perfect warrior, a brilliant tactician, a courageous frontline commander, and a ruthless strategist. He was the hero of Crécy and the genius of Poitiers, a symbol of a nation that refused to accept the odds, a nation that could triumph over a continental superpower through sheer grit and superior skill. This legacy is more than just a chapter in a history book. It is burned into the soul of a nation. The spirit of the Black Prince, the spirit of defiance, of the underdog who turns the tables through courage and ingenuity, is a thread that runs through British history. It is the spirit of a nation that has always punched above its weight, that has faced down empires and stood alone against the storm. The Black Prince never wore the crown of England, dying of illness before his father. But his victories forged an empire and an identity. He proved that it was not the size of the army that mattered most, but the skill of its commander and the spirit of its soldiers. He ensured that England would forever be a nation of lions. If you believe this indomitable spirit is what defines history's greatest victories, then subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell to be the first to witness our next epic story. But now, we want to hear from you. Was the Black Prince a chivalrous hero, the epitome of the knightly ideal? Or was he a ruthless warlord, a pioneer of total war? Let us know your verdict in the comments below.